Good morning. So, after discussing the electromagnetic wave propagation in different media, now we switch over to a new topic, and that is electromagnetic vector and scalar potential. So, let us try to understand what these potentials are and why are they so useful in electrodynamics. So, you all know the two equations. Let me switch over to the next page. So you all know the four Maxwell equations. Divergence of E is rho upon epsilon 0. Divergence of B is equal to 0. Curl of E is minus del B over del T. And the fourth equation is curl of B is mu 0 J plus del D over del T, or curl of H is J plus del D over del T. At the same time, you also know that two are very important identities in vector calculus. The first identity is that the divergence of a curl of a vector quantity is always equal to 0, and the other is the curl of a gradient of a scalar quantity is always equal to 0. So if you look at these four equations in electrostatics, curl of E was equal to 0, and that is why we were able to write E as minus gradient of B. E is equal to minus gradient of B. But here in electrodynamics, curl of E is not equal to 0. Curl of E is minus del B over del T, but divergence of B is equal to 0. So if the divergence of B is equal to 0 and it is 0 always, so we can write down this B here as a curl of a vector quantity. Suppose vector quantity is capital A, so we can write down B to be equal to curl of capital A vector, and capital A vector is called magnetic vector potential. Then if we substitute this curl of A is equal to B in equation number 3, third Maxwell equation. So third Maxwell equation, curl of E plus del over del T of B, B is equal to curl of A. I have already told you that we can interchange del over del T and gradient without any problem, because gradient is a special coordinate and interchanging the two will not make any difference. So del over del T of curl of A becomes now curl of del A over del T, and therefore we can now put them together, and curl of E plus del A over del T becomes equal to 0. Now in place of a curl of E being 0 in electrostatics, here in electrodynamics we are having curl of E plus del E over del T to be equal to 0, and therefore this quantity in the bracket as per the identity in vector calculus can be written as minus gradient of B. So E plus del A over del T is now minus gradient of B. So therefore we can write E as minus gradient of B minus del A over del T. So you can see yourself that E is still equal to minus gradient of B if we are back to electrostatics, where del A over del T will be equal to 0, because it will reduce if del A over del T is equal to 0, or A is not a function of time. So you can see now that we can express both B and A, both the magnetic field and the electric field, in terms of two new variables. One is A is a vector potential, and B is a scalar potential. So we call it as a magnetic scalar potential. So A is vector potential and B is magnetic scalar potential. A is magnetic vector potential. And we can express both B and E in terms of these two vector and scalar potentials. Now we are left with two more equations of Maxwell's. So Maxwell, we made use of the second equation and the third equation to write down B is equal to curl of A and E to be equal to minus gradient of B minus del E over del T. Now we will use this information to rewrite equation number 1 and equation number 4. So let us write down these two equations in terms of the new vector and scalar potential, that is A and B. So we make a substitution in the first equation. So this was this becomes now gradient of minus gradient of V minus del V over del T is rho upon epsilon 0. It is a divergence of E is rho upon epsilon 0. A dot is missing here, so please put a dot here. That then it will become gradient. So a gradient of divergence of gradient of a B will become del square B plus del over del T of divergence of A now becomes equal to minus rho upon epsilon 0. The minus sign from this side is shifted to, has been taken onto the other side. So we have one equation here that we have obtained by exploiting the first Maxwell's equation. Now we make use of the fourth Maxwell equation. So it becomes now curl of A, which you already know can be written as gradient of divergence of A minus del square A, mu 0 j as it is, plus mu naught epsilon naught del over del T of E, and E is minus gradient of B minus del A over del T. So just keep on checking slowly, and if you take all the terms here on this side, so this is minus del A square, it becomes now plus del square A. Mu naught epsilon naught del square E over del T square comes to this side, becomes positive, but we are taking this on the negative side, or multiplying it by negative sign. So this becomes, or we can say we take del square A on this side. So it becomes this one minus gradient of divergence of A comes from here, and divergence of mu naught, divergence is out, sorry, gradient is out. So inside the bracket, we have divergence of A and then mu naught epsilon naught del B over del T. So they are in a bracket and it is equal to minus mu 0 j. Remember, I'm not putting basically the vector signs everywhere, but you have to keep in mind that A is a vector quantity, but B is a scalar quantity, that you always have to remember. So if you look at equation number 3 and 4, these equations are similar to the wave equations. So what we have done, 3 and 4 basically represents all the 4 Maxwell equations, because we made use of equation number 2 and 3 to express E and B in terms of A and B, vector and scalar potential. And then we have made use of the other two equations, first and the last, that means the fourth, to generate two more equations, one for B and other for A. Although they are not for B and A, you can see yourself that they are mixed. In fact, in the third equation, in the first equation, we have A here, and in the second equation also we have B here, so they are interrelated. So third and fourth equations are two inhomogeneous wave equations in terms of A and B, and they carry out the complete information about the Maxwell equation. I hope it is clear, because we made use of the two equations to write down A and B, and we substituted in the first and the last equation. So we get two equations basically relating A and B, and those two equations are interrelated. Now the question comes, what is the advantage of writing this? E and B are experimental measurable quantity. E is a vector quantity and B is also a vector quantity. So in three-dimensional vector space, E will have three components, Ex, Ey and Ez. Similarly, the magnetic field B will also have three components. So in total, we have 6 components to define if we want to understand the propagation of electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic potential. If we express them in terms of the electromagnetic vector potential A and the scalar potential B, A being vector will have 3 components, B being scalar will have 1 component. So ultimately we are converting a 6 component problem into a 4 component problem. That is basically the beauty of doing all these things. So you can see E and B will have 3 components each. So we convert basically 6 component problem to basically 4 component problem where A has 3 component and B has only 1 component. And these equations are basically coupled equations. The two equations basically that don't define the potential also uniquely. We can also say, because if you recall, you compare it with the two equations E and B, for E and B that we got for different media, free space, non-conducting media, conducting media, ionized media. We saw that those two equations were uniquely defined, but these two are not uniquely defined and they are coupled. So they cannot be solved as it is. You can see we have A here and similarly we have B here. So we cannot solve both the equations blindly. We have to have some sort of transformation to basically apply on it so that they become solvable and understandable in terms of A and B. Then one more thing between A and B and E and B. E and B are experimental measurable parameter. While A and B are basically the mathematical parameter, they cannot be measured by the experiments. So now coming to the Gauss transformation. Gauss transformation, just now I have discussed that B is curl of A and E is equal to minus gradient of B minus del A over del T, and the two coupled equation that we wrote, they are for getting the information about A and B. As long as the value of E and B is not changing, and suppose we make a transformation from A and B. A and B are the value of vector and scalar potential in one system, and suppose we switch over to another system where we have the corresponding value as A dash and B dash. The relation between the old set A and B and the new set, without unless and until they are not going to affect the value of E and B, are called Gauss transformation. Let me repeat again. The relation between all possible values of A and the B without affecting the value of E and B defined by the Maxwell equations is called Gauss transformation equation. So let us see for A dash is equal to A plus alpha. So we have to choose the value of alpha in such a way so that if we substitute it here, the value of a B is not affected or it remains unaffected by a substitution. So it is curl of A. So the condition on alpha will be that curl of alpha must be equal to 0. And again, we can expose the identity of vector calculus to write alpha to be equal to plus minus gradient of lambda, because curl of a gradient of a scalar quantity, a scalar number, is always equal to 0. So alpha can be written as plus minus gradient of lambda. So this information for alpha we have got from the first equation, B to be equal to curl of A, so that the value of a B is not affected. Now we make the same substitution in the second equation, keeping in mind that the value of a B is not affected. So if you substitute B dash here, so minus gradient of B minus del A over del minus del A over del T will be there for E. So if you make a substitution for B dash to be equal to B plus B, then what is required is that minus gradient of a beta here, and then we have a minus sign and we are putting plus and minus again. So this beta, gradient of beta plus minus del alpha over del T must be equal to 0. That is the requirement for having the same value of E for both A dash and B dash and A and B. So we can now, the value of alpha is plus minus gradient of lambda. So we put it here. So it is now gradient of beta plus minus delta lambda upon delta T equal to 0. And that will give us the value of a beta to be equal to minus del lambda over del T. It becomes minus plus and plus a function of KT. Why a function of KT is coming here? Because beta, you see this del is a function of a spatial coordinate. So if beta is a function of time, so that will also come into picture. So that is why we will have to include a time dependent function here also, but that will not change basically this, because del lambda over del t is also a function of time. Therefore, adding this number will not change this transformation because that is a constant number. So therefore, with this information, we can write down a dash to be equal to a plus minus gradient of lambda. And if you make the similar substitution here, then b dash becomes equal to b, and this becomes now minus plus delta lambda over delta t. That means if we are writing a dash to be equal to a plus gradient of lambda, then we have to take b dash to be equal to b minus del lambda over del t. So the relation between all possible values of a, because we can have several values of lambda, so we can write down a set of a and b value for the same electric field, but remember, for the same magnetic field, but remember, the reverse is not possible. Reverse means we cannot write several E and B for the same set of A and B. So you have to understand why gauge transformations are required. Gauge transformations are required to basically connect all the possible values of A and B required for the same value of E and B. So to conclude, we can say that for one E and B, we can write down a set of vector and scalar potential. Okay, and therefore, in other words, we can say a group of scalar and vector potential will give us the same value of E and B. And the relationship is called gauge transformation equation. Now, as I told you earlier, that we cannot solve equation number 3 and 4 of the last page directly. So we have to have some sort of restriction that we call as gauge. There are several gauges, several restrictions available in electrodynamics, but in your course, we have basically the two gauges. One is the Coulomb gauge and the other is the Lorentz gauge. So we will understand why the gauge are so important, basically to understand those two equations. So idea is, if we really want to understand electromagnetic waves, so we have to have the information about A and B. That means we will have to solve equation number 3 and 4 for A and B. So as you have already seen that those equations are basically coupled, they are interlinked. So they cannot be solved as it is. You can see yourself. So what we do, these are the two equations. Del square B plus del over del T of divergence of A is equal to minus rho upon epsilon 0. And the other equation is del square A minus mu naught epsilon naught del square A over del T square minus gradient of divergence of A plus mu naught epsilon naught del B over del T to be equal to minus mu 0 J. So Coulomb suggested that if we substitute the value of divergence A to be equal to 0, it is similar to divergence of E is equal to 0 in electrostatics. So it is similar to putting basically the divergence of vector field potential, the vector potential to be equal to 0. So if you substitute this gauge condition into the equation, so the third equation, I am calling about this first and the second. So this equation now becomes a del square B to be equal to minus rho upon epsilon 0. That is our well-known Poisson equation. And when I derived the first Maxwell's equation, I wrote the solution for VR to be equal to 1 upon 4 pi epsilon 0, then a volume integral rho into d tau over R. So here, this is the place where you have to recall the same solution. That means if you substitute divergence of A to be equal to 0, it makes our equation number 3 very simple, or it converts equation number 3 into the Poisson equation, whose solution is well known. So once we know the value of a B by imposing this Coulomb gauge condition from equation number 3, or this equation, we can substitute it here because that is the only hindrance in the next equation. So once we know the value of a B, now the entire equation you see is in terms of A, and we can solve it in principle, although it's very difficult. If we want to comment about Coulomb's gauge, divergence of A to be equal to 0, or Coulomb's gauge condition helps us to simplify basically the one equation, but at the same time it makes the other equation extremely difficult to solve. So therefore, a Coulomb gauge equation, in principle, we can say that Coulomb's gauge can be applied on the two equations. To solve them, we can solve the first equation directly because it is in the form of the Poisson equation. And once we know the solution for B, we can solve it for A also, and we can have the solution for A and B both. The other condition here is Lorentz gauge. Lorentz suggested that let us put this value here, that is the second equation, divergence of A plus mu naught epsilon naught del B over del T to be equal to 0. This was his suggestion. Later on we will see what is the physical significance of putting. Right now we will consider them as a mathematical condition to be imposed on the two equations to help us to understand the solution of the two. So this is called Lorentz gauge condition, divergence of A plus mu naught epsilon naught del B over del T. So if you substitute it here in the second equation or fourth equation, whatever you say, so since this whole term becomes equal to 0, this equation gets converted to del square A minus mu naught epsilon naught del square A over del T square is equal to minus mu 0 J. You can see this equation here. So del square A minus mu naught epsilon naught del square A over del B square is equal to minus mu 0 J. Now if we substitute it in the upper equation, in place of divergence of A, now we have to put minus mu naught epsilon naught del B over del T. So a minus sign will come here. Mu naught epsilon naught will come here, and it is del over del T of del B over del T. And if we substitute it there, you will see that this equation also appears in the same form as basically the above. So del square B minus mu naught epsilon naught del square B over del T square is minus rho upon epsilon 0. So if you look at basically these two equations, basically these are four equations. We can write down three components of equation number 1 and only one for the second one, because second one is a scalar quantity. So in total there are four equations, three for the vector potential and one for the scalar potential. And if we recall now, this del square here is del square over del x square plus del square over del y square plus del square over del z square. Mu naught epsilon naught can be written as 1 upon c square. So we can write the fourth coordinate as a del over del of ICT square. Basically, it is the fourth dimension according to the Lorentz transformation. So this here, del square minus mu naught epsilon naught del square over del T square, it is written as a D-D'Alembert square. We call it as a D-D'Alembert square. It is four-dimensional del square. So in this notation, we will write D-D'Alembert square A is equal to minus mu 0 J, and D-D'Alembert square B to be equal to minus rho upon epsilon 0 epsilon 0. In future, you will see that these two equations are also not different. They are also the part of one equation that you will see basically in the second unit of this course. So if you look at the beauty of Lorentz gauge now, the Lorentz gauge basically converts both the equations in the similar form. In fact, the right hand side are different, left hand side are the same. So we can solve both the equations on the similar footing. Whatever method we have to apply for solving A, the same method can be applied to solve basically equation second also. That is the beauty of a Lorentz gauge. So we will solve basically these two equations in the next lecture. Next thing that we have to discuss here is our Lorentz force in the potential form. Let us write down the Lorentz force in the potential. Potential means, here the potential means the vector potential and the scalar potential. So you all know about the Lorentz force. Lorentz force is sum of the electrostatic force and the magnetic force acting on a charged particle. So we can write mathematically F to be equal to Q into E plus del B over del T. E is now minus gradient of B minus del A over del T, and B is curl of A. So B cross curl of A, we can write it like this. Now, if you recall several formula that I wrote for you in the last lecture, or you can recall the identity number 4 of vector calculus given in the book by Griffith at the last page. You will see the formula for gradient of A dot B, but here we have B dot A. It consists of 4 terms: B cross curl of A, then A cross curl of B, then B dot del into A plus A dot del into B. As I told you, you will have to put basically a vector on A also. Vector here is missing and here also is missing. So you have to put basically a vector at all these places. These things you will do at your own. Now B, the velocity here is a function of time only and not the position. So since it is not a function of position, so you can see here this term A cross del cross B and A dot del into B will be equal to 0 because it is not a function of position. So since B is not a function of position, so even if you write it as AX into del over del X of Bx, Ay into del over del Y of By, and Az into del over into del B Z over del Z, since it is not a function of position, so all those terms will be equal to 0. Similarly, here also you will see that it is del cross B. Del cross B means again del over del X, del over del Y, del over del Z. That means a special derivative. So they will all give us to be equal to 0. So these two terms will be equal to 0. So that is why we can write it as B cross del cross A and B dot del into A. You will see these terms will not be equal to 0. So if we make use of that identity, we can write down this as minus gradient of B minus del A over del T plus gradient of B dot A minus B dot del into A here, because I am writing this term as this minus this. That is why you are getting a minus sign here. Now, let us make some more changes to this. A is a function of all the 3 special coordinates as well as the time coordinate. If we write down the total derivative del A over del T, so del A over del T can be written as del A over del X into del X over del T, and last term will be del A over del T. Now del X over del T is the X component of velocity, so I have written it here, and A I have taken out. So it becomes del X over del T del over del X plus del Y over del T del over del Y plus del Z over del T del over del Z into A plus del A over del T. We can club all these terms together to write at B dot del. B dot del means you can expand it and verify that whatever is written inside the bracket can be written in this form. And this is A plus del A over del T. This dA over dt is called total or convective derivative of A. It is very important to basically remember even this fact also. If you check the last few years GATE questions, you will find out basically this convective derivative once or twice. Okay, so it's very important to remember this also. So in place of the first 2 terms, I have written now dA over dt here. So according to the Newton's second law of motion, force can be written as dP over dt. It is minus q into dA over dt plus the quantity under the gradient term is B minus B dot A. We take basically d over dt term onto the other side. So d over dt of a P plus QA now becomes equal to minus gradient of Q into B minus B dot A. So if you compare it with the Newton's second law of motion dP over dt, then we will have to write down basically the total momentum as the sum of linear momentum plus a contribution coming from basically the vector potential also. So canonical momentum, it is called canonical momentum. So P is equal to small p plus QA, and similarly the potential energy in terms of the scalar and vector potential can be written as Q into V minus V dot A. So you can check yourself. U is equal to Q into V in electrostatics. P is equal to P in electrostatics. But here we have additional term coming from basically the vector and scalar potential. So it's very important to understand basically these two numbers also. So after the Coulomb's gauge and the Lorentz gauge, you saw that the Lorentz gauge are very useful if you compare the two. So Lorentz gauge are very useful in order to find out the solution of both the equations in a simple way or in a similar way. So we will have to solve now the two equations. So therefore we switch over now to the electrodynamics of moving charge. Knowing this much about the vector potential and the scalar potential, we now switch over to the electrodynamics of a moving charge, and that is what we will be doing in the coming few lectures. So you all know that a stationary charge, these two equations are well known to you. If you have a stationary charge produces the electric field only. But if you have a uniform moving charge, then it is capable of generating both the electric field and the magnetic field. In other words, we can say it can generate the electromagnetic field of short range, but they cannot radiate electromagnetic energy. These things will be more clear, that what is the difference between the radiation, why they are short range, why the radiations is not prominent. The energy can be radiated only if the charge particle is accelerated. You will see that electromagnetic energy can be radiated only if a charge particle is accelerated. Then in order to calculate the field means we will calculate the value of A and B first, and then from A and B we will find out the value of E and B, and we will understand the difference between the electrodynamic solution and the electrostatic solution. So in order to calculate basically the fields, that means electric field potential, the vector potential and the scalar potential, there are two ways to solve it. One is the concept of a retarded potential, and other is the concept of relativity. In the concept of retarded potential, the problem is, suppose you have a charge. I will give you the example of an aeroplane. You have an aeroplane moving into the sky. It is producing noise throughout, and suppose you are the observer is standing onto the earth. Suppose a sound reaches your ear, and the same time you look at the sky, you will be able to see the aeroplane at certain location. But remember, the sound that reaches your ear has nothing to do with the present location of the aeroplane. It has been emitted by the aeroplane at basically an earlier location. That is what is meant by retarded position. A retarded position is very important to understand. So what is important in terms of the, I can explain it in a different way. I will say that the cause occurs at the source point. We have a source, we have a charge that is moving at the relativistic speed. So here basically that is the source. So the cause occurs at the source point, but the effect occurs at the field point. Cause means the cause occurs, I gave you the example of the aeroplane. So cause is produced, but the effect that is seen basically at the field point. So the method that we have to apply is called the method of retardation. Whatever information is produced by the charge at the earlier location, we are basically looking at a later time. So that is what is meant by the concept of retarded potential. In the next lecture, we will discuss in more detail. And the next is the theory of relativity. In the relativistic method, we will have to choose basically two inertial frame of references in which the field point in one inertial frame and the source in the other. But we have to assume that the charge is constant or the charge is invariant. So there are two different ways of basically calculating the value of A and B. One is the retarded potential. I hope you will please read in the book by Griffith. In fact, he has tried to explain it by the example of a train. So I hope try to visualize that why retarded potential. Suppose you are making an observation onto the ground at time t, and at the time t you look at the charge particle also, but charge particle is generating electric and magnetic field continuously. So what you see at t has to nothing to do with basically the location of the charge at time t, but it will be it is getting basically the information emitted by the charge at time t minus r over c, where r is the distance of the retarded position of the charge from the point of observation, and c is velocity of light. So r over c is the time taken by the electromagnetic signal to reach the observer, and in the meantime what will happen, the charge will move to a new location. So these things are very important. You have to understand conceptually, and then you will see that in the coming lecture the mathematics also becomes slightly difficult, because we will have to solve these two equations. So please go through basically the two equations. There are several ways of solving these two electromagnetic equations. So these potentials, retarded potentials, are called Liénard-Wiechert potential. Liénard and Wiechert basically are the name of a physicist. So Liénard-Wiechert potential are nothing but the solution of scalar and vector potential of equation number 3 and 4. So to sum up, I will say in this lecture I have basically introduced you the two new parameters, that is A and B, although you must have read about them in your BSc classes as well, and must have solved some problems based on A and B, that in place of solving E and B by applying Biot-Savart's law, you can find out the value of A and B first, and then make use of B is equal to curl of A and E is equal to minus gradient of B minus del A over del T to find out the value of E and B. These type of problems and these type of questions are there at the BSc level. So here after E and B we wrote Maxwell equations in terms of A and B. We found out that it is the writing E and B in terms of A and B reduces 6 component problem into the 4 components problem, but at the same time the two equations that we have to have the complete information about the Maxwell equations becomes more difficult. So in order to solve, we basically discussed about Coulomb gauge and the Lorentz gauge, and we found that Coulomb gauge is not that useful. It simplifies the first equation, but at the same time it complicates the second equation. While coming to the Lorentz gauge, both the equations basically get the similar form and they can be solved on the similar footing. And finally, I told you that there are two ways to solve the problem. One by applying the concept of retarded potential, and other by applying the concept of special theory of relativity, that is Lorentz transformation. So we will make use of the retarded potential concept, and I told you that the potential at time t at a position r will have a meaning with a retarded position or with the location of a charge at a retarded position. So please read about basically the retarded position concept, and then it will be more clear that why, how to derive the Liénard-Wiechert potential or retarded potential or the value of A and B for a moving charge. That is all about today's lecture.